This Monday was Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And on that day, each year, people remember King in various ways. Sometimes we have strange memories of King. Memories that are a little less than real, memories that don't take into account all details, but that's the way it is when we remember people. On Martin Luther King Jr. Day, some people march or demonstrate or protest. Some attend special services or assemblies. Some do acts of service in their communities. Reverend Dr. Andre E. Johnson is a scholar, activist, and minister who speaks and writes about race and communication. And on MLK Day this year, Johnson posted this question on social media. When did MLK Day become a day of service? He answered his own question with a link to a webpage that drew details from the Corporation for National and Community Service to say this about the holiday. Legislation was signed in 1983, creating a federal holiday marking the birthday of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This federal holiday was first observed in 1986. In 1994, Congress passed the King Holiday and Service Act. So 94 is the answer. Designating the Martin Luther King Jr. Federal holiday as a national day of service and charged the Corporation for National and Community Service with leading this effort. Taking place each year on the third Monday in January, the MLK Day of Service is the only federal holiday observed as a national day of service. A day on, not a day off. The MLK Day of Service is a part of United We Serve, the President's national call to service initiatives. It calls for Americans from all walks of life to work together to provide solutions to our most pressing national problems. The MLK Day of Service empowers individuals, strengthens communities, bridges barriers, creates solutions to social problems, and moves us closer to Dr. King's vision of a beloved community. Participation in the MLK Day of Service has grown steadily over the past decade, with hundreds of thousands of Americans each year engaging in projects such as tutoring and mentoring children, painting schools and senior centers, delivering meals, building homes, and reflecting on Dr. King's life and teachings. Many of the projects started on King Day continue to engage volunteers beyond the holiday and impact the community year-round. But Johnson seemed to present the question as sarcasm, criticizing the trend to favor service over action, charity over justice. There's a difference. Watering down King's prophetic legacy. There's a tendency to remember the I have a dream version of King and to forget the Beyond Vietnam version. I Have a Dream was a beautiful speech. It was. Let me share just a few words. Of course, I won't share the whole thing. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair, I say to you today, my friends. So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed, We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. That's probably the most remembered statement of King right there. We don't remember the stuff he said that got him killed. I have a dream that one day down in Alabama with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right down in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with the little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it. This is our hope. And there are many other beautiful words in this speech. That was August 1963 at the Lincoln Memorial. But in April 1967, he presented a very different speech. The King Encyclopedia explains that 4 years after President Kennedy sent the first American troops into Vietnam, Martin Luther King Jr. issued his first public statement on the war. Answering press questions after addressing a Howard University audience on March 2, 1965, King asserted that the war in Vietnam was accomplishing nothing and called for a negotiated settlement. While King was personally opposed to the war, he was concerned that publicly criticizing U.S. foreign policy would damage his relationship with President Johnson, who had been instrumental in passing civil rights legislation and who had declared in April 1965 that he was willing to negotiate a diplomatic end to the war in Vietnam. Though he avoided condemning the war outright, at the August 1965 annual Southern Christian Leadership Convention, King called for a halt to bombing in North Vietnam, urged that the United Nations be empowered to mediate the conflict, and told the crowd that what is required is a small first step that may establish a new spirit of mutual confidence, a step capable of breaking the cycle of mistrust, violence, and war. He supported Johnson's call for diplomatic negotiations and economic development as the beginnings of such a step. Later that year, King framed the issue of war in Vietnam as a moral issue. As a minister of the gospel, he said, I consider war an evil. I must cry out when I see war escalated at any point. King's opposition to the war provoked criticism from members of Congress, the press, and from his civil rights colleagues who argued that expanding his civil rights message to include foreign affairs would harm the black freedom struggle of America. Fearful of being labeled a communist, which would diminish the impact of his civil rights work, King tempered his criticism of U.S. policy in Vietnam through late 1965 and 1966. His wife, Coretta Scott King, took a more active role in opposing the war, speaking at a rally at the Washington Monument on November 27th of 65 with Benjamin Spock, the renowned pediatrician and anti-war activists, and joined in other demonstrations. In December of 66, testifying before a congressional subcommittee on budget priorities, King argued for a rebalancing of fiscal priorities away from America's obsession with Vietnam and toward greater support for anti-poverty programs at home. King led his first anti-war march in Chicago in March of '67 and reinforced the connection between war abroad and injustice at home. The bombs in Vietnam explode at home. They destroy the dream and possibility for a decent America. A few days later, King made it clear that his peace work was not undertaken as the leader of the SCLC, but as an individual, as a clergyman, and one who is greatly concerned about peace. Less than 2 weeks after leading his first Vietnam demonstration, King made his best known and most comprehensive statement against the war, seeking to reduce the potential backlash by framing his speech within the context of religious objection to war. King addressed a crowd of 3,000 people at the Riverside Church in New York City. King delivered a speech entitled Beyond Vietnam, pointing out that the war effort was taking the black young men who had been crippled by our society and sending them 8,000 miles away to guarantee liberties in Southeast Asia, which they had not found in Southwest Georgia and East Harlem. Although the peace community lauded King's willingness to take a public stand against the war in Vietnam, many within the civil rights movement further distanced themselves from his stance. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, for example, issued a statement against merging the civil rights and peace movements. Undeterred, King, Spock, and Harry Belafonte led 10,000 demonstrators on an anti-war march to the United Nations in April of '67. During the last year of his life, King worked with Spock to develop Vietnam Summer, a volunteer project to increase grassroots peace activism in time for the '68 elections. King linked his anti-war and civil rights work in speeches throughout the country, where he described the three problems he saw plaguing the nation: racism, poverty, and the war in Vietnam. In his last Sunday sermon he delivered at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., King said that he was convinced that Vietnam is one of the most unjust wars that has ever been fought in the history of the world. Nearly 5 years after King's assassination, American troops withdrew from Vietnam, and a peace treaty declared South and North Vietnam independent of each other. King's opposition to the war, combined with his influence, made the FBI afraid of him. And I'm pretty sure led to his death. And he seemed against violence in general, not just the war in Vietnam, although the war in Vietnam was a major focus. He also opposed violence in general. In his last speech, not his last Sunday sermon, but his last speech the night before he died, he told marchers in Memphis this: "Secondly, let us keep the issues where they are. The issue is injustice. The issue is the refusal of Memphis to be fair and honest in its dealings with its public servants, who happen to be sanitation workers. Now, we've got to keep attention to that." Just shortly before this speech, there had been some marching, and some people who apparently weren't King's followers joined in and did some violence and just messed up some property. Now, we've got to keep attention on that. That's always the problem with a little violence. You know what happened the other day? And the press dealt only with the window breaking. I read the articles. They very seldom got around to mentioning the fact that 1,300 sanitation workers were on strike, and that Memphis is not being fair to them, and that Mayor Loeb is in dire need of a doctor. They didn't get around to that. So King didn't want violence in the actions that he led. And when I first started learning about King and his speeches, I loved his nonviolent approach to social change because I had learned it from stories and teachings of Jesus. Jesus apparently said, if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. So when I was in 7th grade and a bully hit me on one of my cheeks, I did that. I told him to hit the other one too. And I thought I was being all holy about it. And a year or two later, someone jumped me in the restroom and I passively let him pummel me. But my self-control finally snapped when a football teammate attacked me in the locker room. And then those kinds of things didn't happen much. I still like the nonviolent approach, but violence also can contribute to change. I know it's strange for a UU minister to say that. The civil rights movement didn't fix all the problems, but it did make some progress. And I wonder how much of that progress would have happened if the movement had been completely nonviolent. King discouraged violence, but other movement leaders encouraged it. And even King's nonviolent efforts sometimes included violence by demonstrators following other leaders. Sometimes we can't avoid violence. Sometimes violence contributes to positive change. Sometimes violence gets the attention of the powerful. Now, I'm still a pacifist. But when social justice activists commit to pursuing change by whatever means are necessary, it makes sense to me. My pacifism is not more important than our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And my pacifism isn't more important than the commitment to systemic justice that we find in principles 2 and 6 and 8. I probably won't be on the front lines of any violent protesting. Who knows? I say probably. But I can find ways to contribute, ways to participate. I definitely will not settle for just doing service or charity, although those are good. And I hope that we all want to find ways to join the cry for systemic justice in all our institutions. The Justice Spotlight in our weekly e-news frequently suggests ways to participate. Local and national justice organizations can give us options too. One local opportunity coming up is the rally opposing Arkansas Senate Bill 43. The rally is scheduled to happen at 1 West Center Street on February 4th from 6 to 10:30 p.m. And if you didn't catch all that, please, you can ask me later. I want to close this message with an anonymous prayer. It's a reversal of the one I read a few minutes ago, and I thank Sean for sharing it in the UUFF discussion group on Facebook. I've edited it a little bit to make the words a little bit more UU. Spirit, make me a channel of disturbance. Where there is apathy, let me provoke. Where there is compliance, let me bring questioning. Where there is silence, may I be a voice. Where there is too much comfort and too little action, grant disruption. Where there are doors closed and hearts locked, grant the willingness to listen. Where laws dictate and pain is overlooked, when tradition speaks louder than need, grant that I may seek rather to do justice than to talk about it. Disturb us, O Spirit, to be with as well as for the alienated, to love the unlovable as well as the lovely. Make me a channel of disturbance. May it be so.